Hey everyone, and welcome to the Sunny Go One Piece podcast. On this episode, we're going to be getting into episodes 686 through 688, which will cover manga chapter 749 through 751, as well as a couple pages from chapter 752. So as anarchy begins to consume Dressrosa, Luffy and his allies band together to begin to push through to reach Doflamingo. Alright, so synopsis. It is now all-out chaos in Dressrosa as everyone is trying to make their way to the palace to stop Doflamingo and his birdcage, while Sabo stands his ground to hold off Fujitora and the Marines to help keep the path clear for Luffy. Law also comes to commit to facing and taking on Doflamingo as he reveals a deep personal connection he has with this conflict. Okay, so differences. There are still quite a few. Not quite as few as the last episode, but yeah. So we have several scenes that have been shuffled around in episode 686. First is that in the anime, the scene where Senor Pink catches up to Frankie in front of the factory is moved up to just after Baby Five's explanation of the current status of where everyone is. In the manga, this takes place after everyone and the Tontara decide to carry out their plan of getting Law's cuffs to him, or the keys to his cuffs to him. Also during that scene, the moment where Robin recalls her spider net is of course missing, as that already happened 2 episodes ago. Luffy running down Pika's back and repelling all the bullets with Gomu Gomu no salute fire is also an added anime filler scene. This scene is kind of redundant, as there's a later canon scene where Luffy beats these same henchmen up with Gomu Gomu no Gatling. So yeah, this one's just completely unnecessary. They really drag out the standoff between Sabo and the Marines, as well as adding a few more scenes of the Marine grunts trying to attack Sabo. In the manga, most of this was, I suppose, could have been implied to have happened off screen between chapters in the manga, but in the manga it doesn't return until Bastille is trying to stop his men from attacking Sabo haphazardly. In the anime, they give Bastille a few more shots at Sabo, but in the manga, he doesn't even get one attack off, as the manga immediately goes to Sabo grabbing his sword and breaking it in half. The moment where Kabu calls the Yellow Kabu squad to form the Tontara Airlines is added in the anime as well. In the manga, we don't see this, and the story resumes after they've already landed and gathered after Luffy has already faced Doflamingo in the tunnel. On a separate but related note, the subtitles in the Crunchyroll subs, for some reason, still translate Kabu and the Yellow Kabu squad as cub, like a child bear. But it's actually Kabu, short for Kabutomushi, which is also where the Kabuto mask and helmet come from in samurai culture, which I feel like is well known enough that you could just call it Kabu instead of cub, which is really weird. But yeah, that's a weird point. Anyways, next, the snippet of the fight between Frankie and Senor Pink in episode 688 is also filler, but I will admit it's pretty funny when the girls get grossed out at having to see Frankie's package, and he's definitely packing a pretty big package from the way Toei animates this. I mean, they really get up in there, which is pretty funny. Similarly, the scene where Zoro seemingly comes to the realization of how Pika's powers work is also added anime filler. These 2 scenes are unnecessary, as there are 2 scenes in the manga later on that essentially accomplish the same thing later on. So again, these are both redundant fillers, but they're pretty short and kind of fun, so it's not really that bad and I don't mind it at all. Lastly, there's another filler scene at the end where we see the Funk brothers, specifically Kelly Funk, and his lackeys get taken out by somebody, and this we don't get to see in the manga until later in a slight mini flashback. This one I do kind of have a problem with showing for spoiler reasons, but I can't really talk about it without spoiling it here, so I'll kind of briefly mention it in the spoiler section, but I do have a problem because it kind of ruins the flow of the next episode. Alright, so that's it for the differences, so let's get into the episodes themselves. With Zoro holding off Pika, giving way for Luffy and everyone riding Ushi to continue forward, we're given an update on the overall situation from Baby 5, as many of the second-tier executives are sitting on the plateau looking at what's taking place. However, there's one curiously missing from this group, and that's Senor Pink, who has gone after Frankie to finish him off. As the 2 opposing weirdos, they've built kind of a bit of a kinship rivalry, which makes the main part of their duel very fun and meaningful. Kuros has to make it past the desperate Dressrosa citizens while Fujitora and the Marines are on their way to the palace entrance to head off everyone. It's at this point something significant happens. After all this time of trying to stay objective and staying on plan, Law makes a huge decision. Law is now determined in his heart and mind to directly take out Doflamingo instead of indirectly having Kaido do it for him. This is the first time you really ever see Law opening up to anyone. It's really a turning point for the Luffy and Law in terms of their alliance and friendship, even though Law would never admit they're friends yet. Law tells Luffy that 13 years ago, Doflamingo killed the person that saved his life from Doflamingo and a person he loved a great deal. A former Don Quixote top executive, Corazon, Doflamingo's actual biological brother, which is kind of a shocking twist. And this is definitely setting up another flashback, one involving Law and his backstory. And believe me, this is one of the best and most heartbreaking flashbacks in the entire series, and up until very recently was, in my opinion, the best flashback in the entire series was this whole Law, Doflamingo, and Corazon flashback. I still love it, and I still really enjoy watching it despite how, tough it is to watch. We now know why the heart seat is still left empty, and that used to belong to Corazon, as Corazon means heart in Spanish. Now the decision to leave that spot open only for Doflamingo to force Law into that seat eventually seems like another one of Doflamingo's cruel games. I know, like many people, I was very excited about the prospect to dive more into who Law is and explore his character more. It's also apparent that Law is really starting to see Luffy in a different light. Like he's starting to see what makes him so special and view him as more than just a means to enact his plans. But I always believed that there were other reasons that he was drawn to Luffy prior to this. It's hard to talk about this without the whole context of what I know throughout the series. But yeah, it's very interesting to go back and rewatch these and to look at this section with a little bit more, more detail and hindsight available, because Law and Luffy's relationship and friendship is very interesting. And I'll get a little bit more into this in the next podcast, most likely because of a certain scene. But yeah, it's very interesting. So yeah, I can't wait to get more into this story when we get there. Now, near the plateau, we go from one emotional scene to another one with King Riku that really gets your heart pumping and excitement brewing. Like, Riku questions why Viola has so much faith in these pirates when she mentions that she needs to get Law's cuff keys to him. Viola's words here not only make you proud of the Straw Hats and get you pumped for what's coming, but it also perfectly encapsulates succinctly what Isho was saying about the world government, the Marines, and the Shibukai, and how broken and corrupt all of it is. A world government-sanctioned pirate was allowed to run wild and overthrow a country and install himself as the king while tyrannically ruling it with fear and manipulation, and the supposed quote-unquote good guys, the world government and the Marines, stood by and did nothing to help the citizens who have been suffering for over a decade. And she no longer wants to put her trust in an institution filled with people with such corrupt intentions. What she sees is a bunch of pirates who have shown nothing but kindness and goodwill to humanity, trying to genuinely help the people of Dressrosa. And I absolutely love this scene because that's Luffy in every single arc. He may not think of himself as a hero or even like to be called a hero, but Luffy and the Straw Hats just do what is right by people just because it's the right thing to do. I always get chills when Viola, Leo, and Rebecca stand up and vouch for Luffy and the Straw Hats. And even this is only in the anime. It's awesome seeing Robin just kind of standing there smiling because she knows exactly what it's like to depend on Luffy and be saved by him. She knows that they are the real deal, and now she's part of them. Riku then pretty much mentions the theme of this episode. Luffy provides hope to everyone. Law changes his decision because of the hope that he sees in Luffy actually being able to take down Doflamingo. And similarly, that Viola, Rebecca, and the Tontara all want to fight because of the hope that Luffy creates, because he's willing to do what no one else will. This is why everyone instinctively follows Luffy, and it's such an incredible message that gets hammered home every arc, but I'd never get tired of seeing it or hearing it. Also, credit to Toei, I have to say this scene is way better in the anime as it adds so much more emotion with the voice acting and the music adding so much more atmosphere to it. It's incredible. I love this scene the way it's done in the anime. I mean, in the manga it's great too, but it's definitely better in the anime. Now, moving on, at the base of the plateau, the gladiators have made it there and have started to climb up to Dellinger and the other executives to their surprise, considering they had thought that Fujitora and the Marines had shored up the defenses there, but it turns out they've been held up by someone, and that someone being the newly powered up Sabo. He's running interference for Luffy so that he can have a clear shot at Doflamingo. And I was wondering what was going to keep Fujitora busy this whole time, but now I've got my answer. And this is also a bit of redemption for Ace as well. The Marines were the ones that put Ace in that position that led to his death, and Sabo wasn't there to stop it, but now he is here to protect his other brother from the Marines. And we'll talk a little bit more about why Sabo wasn't there to save Ace, as it is kind of a sort of a plot hole, I feel like, at this point. And it does hint at it, but it doesn't fully reveal it. It's definitely one of the more controversial choices Oda has made, so we will certainly talk about it when it's finally fully revealed later on, but just keep that in the back of your mind. In any case, let's get back to the current story at hand, as we get Sabo with his new powers is about to take on a Marine Admiral and a squad with at least 2 Vice Admirals. Sabo has some balls on him. I mean, that's quite the thing to sort of take on. And when I first saw this moment, I thought to myself, just how freaking strong is Sabo actually? I mean, even with the meta powers, he must be insanely strong to be confident enough to take on Fujitora alone, much less him with backup. Not only that, but at the end of episode 687, you can see that Fujitora is trying to push him down with gravity, but Sabo is able to withstand it. And I'm not entirely sure how he's able to resist it outside of maybe gravity doesn't affect like intangible fire. But then why can't Fujitora just push the ground beneath him like he did to Zoro? But I suppose since you can pretty much float when turned into fire, I guess that would be ineffective here too. I'm actually not sure what the physics are with gravity and fire. I probably should have looked that up, but it's too late now. Anyways, I love how when Fujitora asks, is it the Revolutionary Army's job to provide backup for pirates? And at first Sabo responds yes, but then changes his answers to, as a duty to my brother it is. And I love that. And I know people have issues with Sabo's return, but I love that Luffy still has Sabo from a purely emotional and subjective point of view. Like, I want Luffy to be happy, and seeing him reunite with one of his brothers and seeing that brother so proud and willing to take on an admiral to protect him just kind of fills my heart. And I like it a lot. Now, narratively speaking, yeah, there are a lot of issues to Sabo, for sure, just in terms of his place in the story, but I'm not going to get caught up in that just yet. Sabo makes quick work of pretty much everyone outside of Fujitora. Even Bastille is quickly dispatched of. And it's kind of funny how Bastille is like, you're no match for Sabo to his men, but he himself is also nothing at the hands of Sabo, who also gets taken out basically in one hit. And in the anime, they do stretch this fight out a little bit, like I mentioned, but it still doesn't salvage the ass-beating Bastille takes as Sabo uses his Dragon Claw style to not only break his cleaver sword in half, but imply that he kind of crushed his skull a bit before he can kill him. Fujitora rains down another meteor, but because of the birdcage, it gets sliced into several pieces, raining down flaming meteorites all over the place, kind of hitting people indiscriminately. I don't think anyone is actually hit, but it's kind of funny. And even his own men call him out on this. It's like, can you warn us before you do something like that? And it's during this scene where Fujitora comes to the realization that Sabo is talking about being brothers with Ace and Luffy, where we get confirmation that it was in fact Sabo who visited Ace in Whitebeard's grave to pay his respects to his fallen brother, and to put the sake and the 3 cups, as well as the newspaper, in honor of him to remind Ace that Luffy has made it back, which we saw in the cover story of chapter 668 from the Decks of the World cover story. And this was also our first real hint that Sabo was in fact still alive and was aware of Ace's death and Luffy's reemergence, as well as foreshadowing his proper return to the main story, which eventually did happen. Sabo being the Revolutionary Army's number 2, while Ace was also the second division captain of the Whitebeard Pirates, is also a nice bit of symmetry between the two. However, they are both outdone by their supposedly younger crybaby little brother, as Luffy is the captain or the number 1 of his crew, showing just how much more ambition Luffy had, which was evident even in the flashbacks as kids. Unfortunately, as awesome as this matchup is, we actually don't really get to see much of it even later on. Now, before moving on to episode 688, I think it's time we talk about the Vice Admirals and how they're used in the story, because Bastille is yet another Marine Vice Admiral that's basically treated like fodder. And there were 2 of them in this arc, with Maynard being the other one, but this is a trend that has been pretty much going on in the entire story ever since Vice Admirals were kind of introduced. Outside of a select few like Garp, who's essentially an admiral but refuses to accept the promotion, as well as his equal Tsuru, and maybe Momonga, most of the Vice Admirals have largely been used as devices and a measuring stick for Oda to showcase other characters' strengths. I'm honestly not sure how I feel about this even after all these years. Like, these guys are supposed to be one rank below the admirals, and the admirals are absurdly strong, which means I feel like proportionately they should be just a bit below them, but their strength is just way weaker. Like, there's like this huge gap between the 2 ranks to the point where even if you're not like a power scaling nerd, which I generally am not, it's still hard to deny the fact that it stands out that the rank just below the admirals is this weak. Like, just in this arc alone, you have Maynard getting his ass beat down by Bartolomeo like it was nothing and then tossed in the trash. Similarly, Smoker is constantly getting his ass handed to him, and you also saw several of them being beaten fairly easily, like Lons at Marineford, although that was at the hands of Whitebeard, so it kind of makes sense, but he didn't even really put up a fight. And that's my point, really. I don't need them to be overwhelmingly powerful like the Admirals, but at least make them a challenge and not get taken out in one hit with relative ease by everyone. Ultimately, I don't really mind it that much, but it does stick out to me every time Oda uses this trope. But since I don't care as much about power scaling continuity, I just kind of roll with it. And to his credit, Oda is a bit more careful about how he uses the Vice Admirals as the story goes on, so as to not devalue them as much. And I see how it's convenient shorthand for him to convey just how strong someone else is and give them a victory that that they use to showcase their strength. But I just had to point it out because we've basically got 3 Vice Admirals easily taken out in the course of 2 arcs with Smoker, Maynard, and now Bastille. And it just sticks out like a sore thumb. It's really weird. You have some of these Vice Admirals who are considered to be like these intimidating forces, particularly when they get their like real big moment to shine during the Buster Call. And even then, they just kind of like stand there, really. They really don't do much, to be quite honest. And yeah, even to this point, anytime a Vice Admiral does fight, he just gets his ass handed to him. And it really does stand out. Like, you really think to yourself, these are the Vice Admirals? Like, these are the guys that are just one rank below people like Kuzan, Sakazuki, Borsellino, Isho. Like, these guys are like ridiculously weak compared to like just one rank above them. So yeah, it always stood out to me. And I thought, now that we've got 3 of them basically almost in a row, that we've seen them just lose pretty easily, I felt like it was time to kind of mention it. But anyways, moving on. By now, Luffy has already gone past the first plateau, and another one of the gladiators has arrived to join Luffy, and this time it's the brothers with the dumb jacket fruit, or the jacket fruit, the Funk brothers, Kelly and Bobby Funk, who are right now fused together to help them out with a shortcut, but it's clear he's got some ulterior motives. But in entering the shortcut tunnel, Abdullah and Jet are accidentally knocked off, and they get knocked out by standing up on Ushi, and they hit their head on the tunnel ceiling. And this was stupid, but kind of funny. But anyways, I'll be honest. At first, all the way up until this point, I thought Abdullah and Jet were the ones who were going to betray Luffy, which is why they were so, which is why I thought they were so insistent on tagging along, because they wanted to be close by to sort of opportunistically find the right moment to take him out. But when I saw this moment, I started to doubt this conclusion and admittedly judged a book by their cover and just automatically assumed these guys were going to betray Luffy solely on their kind of sleazy appearances. And they kind of also act a little suspiciously too. And I think that was by intention. And I'm pretty sure Oda actually designed it that way. But when they got knocked over like that, for some reason, I began to think maybe these guys aren't bad guys, especially with the Funk Brothers now serving this role. Now, during this, Law questions Luffy about what they're going to do about his cuffs, since it's essentially suicide to face Doflamingo while still cuffed. And Luffy, per usual, doesn't have a plan and just leaves it up to fate, assuming it'll work itself out, to which Law, of course, completely bonks at this plan or lack thereof. But even a minute later, Robin calls him on the Dendemushi, and Luffy answers in his usual manner by blurting out, "This is Luffy, the man who will become the Pirate King." Robin and Leo explain that Viola found the key and that they will meet them up on the 4th plateau where the Sunflower Garden is. And I freaking love after this, Luffy profoundly mentions to Law, "See, it worked out," to which he shouts back, "That was pure coincidence." But while it may seem like coincidence as Luffy randomly gets saved all the time, but like I've mentioned in past podcasts, I believe for Luffy, it's coincidences that are created by his aura. And by aura, I mean the positive energy he puts into the world by being kind, caring for people, helping others, making smart-ish decisions, and just general overall positive attitude. Luffy, time and time again, is saved seemingly randomly by people because so many people around him want to help him. And there's always someone there to assist him because of that fact. It's not random. It happens because he's always putting himself out there in such a positive way. Of course, his father helping him in Logtown is a clear example, but then there are other moments like the Lapan coming in to save him during the Drama Island arc because of his willingness to help them earlier. Also, Robin saving him after his first defeat to Crocodile in the sand because of the kind of person that Luffy has shown himself to be, as well as Boncré and Ivankov magically being there to save him in Impel Down, which of course is due to Luffy showing Boncré friendship despite their differences. There are countless other times where it seems like there shouldn't be anything there to help Luffy, but because of his actions and the person he is earlier on, it compels people to want to constantly help Luffy, and this is no different. Viola, Rebecca, and Leo all want to help Luffy and are willing to get the handcuff keys to him. Essentially, they just magically appear, but because all the work that Luffy put into gaining their trust and to helping them. It's the idea that you can create your own luck through hard work. It's not just luck, it's all the things that go into how you live your life that create those opportunities for luck to happen. With the help of Kabu and Leo, they call in the Tontara Airlines to help the trio of Robin, Rebecca, and Bartolomeo as well, and they glide and jump across the rooftops to the Sunflower Garden. Although I know I have to suspend kind of disbelief in One Piece, but how are they able to hold on to those tiny strings? They still have to hang on to those tiny strings, right? They still have to hold their weight up. And the strings that thin will dig into their palms and hurt so badly, or you'll just kind of slide right through them. It's not like they're like big, thick ropes or anything like that. And even ropes will still hurt because you have to basically carry yourself the whole time. Your grip strength has to be insane. Anyways, the episode ends on the cliffhanger that Luffy, Law, and Ushi have indeed been led into a trap, with standing water making Luffy seemingly weak, and waiting for them is Doflamingo. Although I think everybody knew that this was another string clone, as there would be no way Doflamingo would also be down there with the water and also put himself at risk. Of course, we continue this on the next episode, but before we close this podcast out, we have to talk about the new opening. So, starting in episode 687, lasting 60 episodes till 746, we get the new opening theme, Hard Knock Days, performed by the male rhythm pop dance group Generations from Exile Tribe. So, the Exile Tribe is basically like a supergroup collective formed by their music label, LDH, and consisting of like a dozen different groups that are different groups that stem from the original Exile band that debuted in 2001. And they just kept adding to the collective over the years. And since 2011 is when they formed the Exile Tribe. And this concept always confused the hell out of me, but I guess it's kind of like franchising your band so that you can constantly create new bands, but attach them to a recognizable name so they have that name recognition and draw from the existing fan base rather than having to start from complete scratch, which is pretty hard as a band, I feel like. And I grew up being a big fan of the original Exile group, so I was pretty hyped to find out that one of the Exile Tribe groups was doing a One Piece opening. And I think in the US, you might be most familiar with the original Exile. They performed the song The Next Door, which was used as the main theme song for Street Fighter 4. And they actually sing both the English and Japanese versions. And yeah, it was fun and exciting at the time seeing two consecutive One Piece openings being sung by two really big J-pop groups that I really liked, with Wake Up by AAA as well as Hard Knock Days by Generations from Exile Tribe. So yeah, I really like this. And now that I've talked your ear off about the band itself, let's get into the opening. And I think the first thing that stands out about this song is the themes and messages are slightly different from your sort of usual openings. Instead of being about adventure, exploration, and chasing your dreams, Hard Knock Days really emphasizes the theme of facing challenges and getting knocked down but continuing to get up and push forward. And given what's happening and what's about to happen in the series, these are perfect themes to capture in the song because the rest of Dressrosa really push our characters and have them face some crazy adversity. The other thing that stands out in contrast with past openings is the sound and style of this song. Hard Knock Days is firmly a dance pop song, which isn't something we've really had since maybe the Eurobeat style of the second opening, Believe, but that's also kind of a completely different sound as well. Hard Knock Days is awesome. The song starts off with a literal bang, and from there, it always seems like it's building energy until the chorus just explodes, not unlike being in a constant anime fight. And this song just has so much energy, it's an awesome listen. The animation itself is pretty standard and doesn't really do anything too special, and I feel like that is where the opening kind of falters a little bit. A lot of the animation feels pretty flat and very stiff, except for the part where the chorus drops and we get to see the Straw Hats all showcase their abilities. I particularly love that moment where Usopp is shown riding his Impact Wolf, and I just wish he used that move way more often because it looks awesome. Another detail I really like during the part where Cavendish is slicing through the giant nutcrackers. For a split second at the end of that attack, you can see his alter ego Hakuba flash on the screen. It's really easy to miss if you're not paying attention. Also, for those of you wondering, in that giant group running shot, there are a few characters in the back that are a little harder to make out, especially the one between Ivankov and Inazuma. That is Iceberg. It took me a long time to figure that one out. Alongside him are Kureha, Dalton, Polly, Kokoro, and Chimney, and just in front of Chimney is Lola. Another easy character to miss is in the upper right corner. Kami and Papag are there just to the side of Shirahoshi as well. It's interesting to see which characters they chose for this shot and which they decided to leave out. I think the most curious one is Lola because all the other ones have some sort of a personal connection to one of the Straw Hats. I mean, even Jinbei himself, since he basically is one at this time, he's just not part of the crew right now. But Lola being included always stood out to me. And in hindsight, I wonder if this was a small hint towards her significance in a future arc. But it's hard to believe since the next arc would be another year before it even started in the manga. So this might just be a huge coincidence. Of course, this wouldn't be a One Piece opening if it didn't spoil a few things. And there are two somewhat big ones, and they're in the latter half of the opening, revealing two big characters before we see them in the series, and it's not hard for even anime-only watchers to figure out who they are based on the context and visual clues. Now, I won't spoil it here in case you want to remain surprised, but spoilers or not, even with the average accompanying animation, this is still an awesome opening theme and one of my favorites that I love listening to, especially on long drives or during workouts. It really puts you not only in a good mood, but an energized one. And yeah, it's awesome. But yeah, that's going to be it for this episode, but we will have to see how Luffy and Law make it out of this with the trap that Doflamingo has laid for them in the next podcast. Anyways, if you did enjoy this, send me a like or comment. And if you want to join me on this journey of rewatching One Piece, please consider subscribing. Check out my Instagram at SunnyGo Podcast for updates on when I post new episodes, as well as to see pictures of my manga collection and card collection too. Yeah, but as always, just listening to the podcast is enough for me. But if you feel like extra supporting me, check out my Buy Me a Coffee profile. And I wanted to thank you for taking the time to listen to my podcast. Just a tiny spoiler section, just a couple things I wanted to reference that I mentioned up in the non-spoiler section. But if you're not interested in that, stay safe out there, and I hope to see you on the next episode. Bye! All right, so spoiler section. So yeah, just two things I kind of wanted to mention. First is the sort of the added scene of Kelly Funk being taken out. I don't like this because, and I mean, I guess it ultimately doesn't really matter because because of plot armor, you're never gonna think that like Luffy and Law are actually in trouble. But the thing is, by including this scene beforehand, it basically tells you that someone is on their way. And I know what actually ended up happening is that was actually Doflamingo's clone that kills, or not kills, but takes out Kelly Funk. And yeah, but still, you're meant to believe that Kelly Funk was taken out and somebody is coming to help them. And so when that scene with Abdullah and Jet, who actually do end up coming to help them, you're never really put in a position where you feel like they're actually in any danger. I mean, I know from like a story perspective that they were never in actual danger, but I don't know, like, why include this scene? Why not build it up to think that no one is there, or that you're secretly hoping that Abdullah and Jet are actually going to wake back up? And of course, that's what ends up happening. Again, it's not a big deal because you're not really surprised all that much, but it's like, why kill any level of sort of suspense by including that scene? It just seems really weird, especially when we're shown what actually happens literally pages from that point on, or I guess in this situation, minutes from actually seeing what happens. And so it seems unnecessary. The last two I wanted to talk about are the two spoilers in Hard Knock Days, the opening. So in this opening, we actually get to see three characters that we haven't met yet. The first one is a really minor one, but you actually do see Queen, the I guess the warden of the factory, the one that's basically controlling all the Tontara inside the factory. But that one's like a really brief and you'll miss it kind of cameo in the opening where Senor Pink suplexes Frankie, and everybody from the bottom of the screen pops up in shock, and you see her in the bottom middle. But the two that I really wanted to focus on was the reveal of Kanjuro and Corazon. So Kanjuro you actually see for the first time here, and you actually don't meet Kanjuro, I believe, for another like 3 episodes. And so you actually do get to see Kanjuro for the first time in the anime. And this one is a pretty big spoiler because it's not hard to figure out that it is Kanjuro. First off, the way he looks like he's from Wano. And second of all, he's standing next to Kinemon, so it's like, who could this be? I mean, even if you're not, caught up in the manga, you're still going to realize that is Kanjuro. So yeah, that's kind of a big spoiler in terms of who Kanjuro is. The next one is Corazon, as well as we do see a Kid Law. And this one's also really obvious too, because the guy is covered in hearts. Um, like his little like hat has like hearts hanging off of them. His shirt is covered in hearts. He's got a heart on his eye. Like this is clearly Corazon. And also, we get to see the little kid Law standing behind him. And this scene is obviously the iconic tragic scene where he is about to say goodbye to Law. And yeah, it seems really interesting that they just show Corazon. I'm surprised that they didn't do what they did with Sabo in the last opening, where they kept his face in the shadow until it was time to reveal him. So like you can clearly tell it was Sabo when it focuses on him, but until Sabo was actually revealed, his face was shadowed out with his hat. I'm surprised that they didn't do something similar with Corazon in this opening, but they just literally full on show him, and the flashback doesn't even happen for like probably another dozen episodes too. So you don't actually get to see Corazon for a while, and you already see him in this opening. So, and again, it doesn't really spoil anything in terms of the story or anything like that, but it just seems weird to reveal these characters so early on. Like clearly Toei has shown a willingness to change the openings a little bit and add new scenes. Like we saw that with Wake Up for the first time, where the first half they have a different set of scenes for the in story moments, and then they replace them halfway through, and they put like Pika and like Dellinger and Senor Pink in there, as well as the Revolutionary Army folks with Koala, Sabo, and Huck. And so yeah, I don't know why they didn't like have a different set for this, and then they add Corazon in later. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Why bother spoiling that? I mean, ultimately, like I said, it doesn't really matter, because for non-manga readers, they're not going to pick up on that, but it just still seems weird to spoil that. But anyways, yeah, those are the two things I kind of wanted to mention, but ultimately, they're not a big deal. They're just kind of like small nitpicks. Anyways, thanks for listening to my little rant, and hope to see you in the next episode. See ya.